The United States also exhibits symptoms typical of a third-world country, where a few powerful families dominate, and the general population faces increasing poverty and a widening gap between the elite and everyone else. As much as Trump portrays himself as anti-establishment, he is also a product of it. Presidents in the U.S. have no real power. They are merely sponsored figures with limited shelf lives. The shadow power behind the oil industry, military-industrial complex, financial institutions, and big pharma. An examination of the United States' elite domination. The United States, often heralded as the epitome of democracy and economic prosperity, paradoxically exhibits symptoms typical of a third-world country. A few powerful families and elite groups dominate the nation, resulting in increasing poverty and a widening gap between the rich and the general population. Despite figures like Donald Trump portraying themselves as anti-establishment, they are ultimately products of the very system they claim to oppose. This essay delves into the influential forces behind the oil industry, the military-industrial complex, financial institutions, and big pharma to uncover the underlying power dynamics that shape the U.S. The oil industry, black gold and power. The oil industry has been a cornerstone of the U.S. economy for over a century, wielding significant influence over national and global politics. Companies like ExxonMobil, Chevron, and BP are not just economic entities but political powerhouses with the ability to shape policy and international relations. The wealth generated from oil has allowed a few families and corporate executives to amass extraordinary power, creating a dynamic where their interests often dictate national policy. For instance, the close relationship between the oil industry and the government is exemplified by the revolving door between corporate executives and political appointments. This symbiotic relationship ensures that energy policies favor the continuation of fossil fuel dominance, often at the expense of environmental and social considerations. The influence of oil money in politics undermines democratic processes, as policies are crafted to benefit the elite rather than the broader population. The military-industrial complex, war as a business. The term military-industrial complex, coined by President Dwight D. Eisenhower, describes the intricate relationship between the military, government, and defense contractors. This complex has grown exponentially, driven by continuous conflicts and the perpetual state of war. Companies like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and Raytheon thrive on defense contracts, which are funded by taxpayer money and ensure a steady flow of revenue regardless of the nation's economic state. The military-industrial complex perpetuates a cycle where defense spending takes precedence over social programs, contributing to the widening gap between the elite and the general populace. The influence of defense contractors in politics, through lobbying and campaign contributions, ensures that military spending remains a priority, often leading to unnecessary conflicts that serve corporate interests rather than national security. Financial institutions, the custodians of wealth. Financial institutions, including major banks like J.P. Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, and Citibank, hold significant sway over the U.S. economy. These institutions control the flow of capital, influencing everything from housing markets to government policy. The 2008 financial crisis starkly revealed the extent of their power, as the government bailed out these banks to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars, while ordinary Americans faced foreclosures and unemployment. The power of financial institutions lies in their ability to shape economic policy through lobbying and political donations. Their influence ensures that regulations remain favorable to their interests, often at the expense of consumer protection and economic stability. This dynamic contributes to the increasing wealth disparity, as financial gains are concentrated among the elite, while the general population bears the brunt of economic downturns. Big Pharma, health as a commodity. The pharmaceutical industry, dominated by giants like Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and Merck, wields immense power over public health policy and practices. The profit-driven nature of Big Pharma often leads to prioritizing lucrative treatments over accessible healthcare solutions. The opioid crisis, fueled by aggressive marketing and lobbying efforts by pharmaceutical companies, highlights the devastating impact of this approach on public health. Big Pharma's influence extends to the political realm, where substantial campaign contributions and lobbying efforts shape healthcare policy. This ensures that drug prices remain high and regulatory frameworks favor corporate profits over patient welfare. The result is a healthcare system that serves the interests of the elite, exacerbating health disparities and limiting access to affordable care for the general population. The illusion of anti-establishment figures. Figures like Donald Trump capitalize on public discontent by positioning themselves as anti-establishment champions. However, their policies and affiliations often reveal them to be products of the very system they critique. Trump's administration, for example, saw significant appointments from the same elite circles, and his policies largely favored corporate interests, including tax cuts for the wealthy and deregulation efforts that benefited big business. Presidents in the U.S., regardless of their rhetoric, often have limited real power. They operate within a system heavily influenced by powerful lobbies and elite interests, making substantial change difficult. The facade of democratic choice masks the reality that many leaders are selected, sponsored, and supported by the same influential groups that perpetuate inequality and control. Conclusion: the United States, despite its image as a beacon of democracy and opportunity, grapples with significant inequality driven by the power of a few elite families and corporations. The oil industry, military-industrial complex, financial institutions, and big pharma collectively shape national policy and economic dynamics to their advantage. Figures like Trump, who present themselves as anti-establishment, ultimately reinforce the status quo, highlighting the deep-rooted influence of elite interests. To address these issues, it is essential to recognize and challenge the underlying power structures, striving for a more equitable system that truly represents and serves the broader population.